If someone told you that 10 ancient sentences could determine the destiny of your soul, would you ignore them or lean in, desperate to know what you've been missing? For millennia, the 10 Commandments have stood like thunder on a mountaintop, etched in stone, dividing light from darkness, order from chaos. Yet in a world driven by modern desire and ever-shifting truths, do these divine laws still hold any power? Or are they simply relics of a forgotten age, crumbling and irrelevant? Today, we're peeling back the veil on secrets hidden in these commands, discovering not just rigid rules, but a living blueprint for life, joy, and purpose. Few realize the revolution that waits within these words, or how every heartbeat, every relationship, every decision is shaped by their presence or their absence. What you'll learn will challenge what you think you know about freedom, morality, and connection with the divine. Are you ready to see beyond the dusty tablets and hear God's voice echoing into your story? Keep watching to unlock the real reason these commandments remain as vital now as the day fire and smoke-crowned Sinai. This understanding will change everything if you dare to listen. Picture this. A nation of former slaves stands trembling at the foot of a smoking mountain, thunder rolling overhead, lightning scarring the sky. The air pulses, heavy, electric. Then, above the chaos, a voice as deep as eternity breaks the silence, shattering the world's assumptions about what's right, what's real, what's required. What are these words so powerful that an entire people wouldn't even dare to look up as they are spoken? This was not merely history, it was the birth of a new relationship between God and humanity. And you might be surprised to discover how every moment of this ancient drama is inseparably connected to your life, right now. But before we can understand why these 10 seemingly simple statements transformed the world, we need to enter the ancient landscape. Dust, heat, tension. The Israelite people had just escaped centuries of Egyptian bondage. Imagine the trauma. Generations who'd only known forced labor, whose identity was shaped by handlers' whips and slave masters' commands. Suddenly, freedom, a gift almost terrifying in its unfamiliarity. But freedom unattached to purpose or wisdom can quickly devolve into chaos. The people needed more than escape. They needed a foundation so indestructible it could anchor the soul of a nation for millennia. It is here, at Mount Sinai, that God does the unthinkable. While other nations carved their laws by the whims of human kings, Israel's code would be etched in stone, not by man, but by the very finger of God. Exodus 31:18 declares, "When the Lord finished speaking to Moses, he gave him the 2 tablets of the testimony, the tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God." Can you picture the awe, the trembling fear as Moses descends, holding not mere stone, but the physical handwriting of the divine? Many believe religion is just human opinion about the sacred. But here, the paradigm flips. These commandments are not our search for God. They are God's reaching for us. Perhaps now you're asking, why 10? Why these? It's no accident. 10, completion, wholeness, echoing the creation story itself. Remember Genesis. 10 times God says, "Let there be." 10 utterances birth the world. 10 commandments would now birth a new moral universe. The Israelites, gathered in silence, realized the weight of what was happening, as if all of history bent at that mountain, as if the world was being recreated from the inside. But there is a secret hidden even deeper. Before any law was spoken, Exodus 22 reveals the first astonishing words. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." The law did not begin with commands, but with liberation, with grace. Many assume the 10 Commandments are a "do this, don't do that" checklist designed to stifle joy. But the foundation is entirely different. A God who initiates, rescues, and then reveals the path of true freedom. Imagine feeling the fear drain away as you realize these laws are not shackles, but the architecture of liberty. So what were the commandments really? Was this just another list of don'ts to control the masses, or something infinitely richer, a mirror reflecting the heart of the Creator? As God thunders, "You shall have no other gods before me," a cosmic invitation is being unleashed. Know me, love me, live in a relationship with one who is both holy and near. Did you ever wonder why, from the very first word, the commandments reach for the inner life? Loyalties never outwardly seen, motives tucked away from human view. But the story doesn't stop at Sinai. These 10 declarations become the DNA of the entire Hebrew scriptures, echoed in the Psalms, interpreted by the prophets, and centuries later, distilled by Jesus himself. When a Torah expert asked him to name the greatest commandment, Christ replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments, Matthew 22:37-40. Centuries compressed into a heartbeat of truth. The commandments were not cold laws dropped from heaven, but relational promises, a sacred contract between a loving God and a hurting people. Picture the shimmering cloud atop Sinai, God drawing near. A drama that shook the ground so powerfully, Exodus tells us, the people begged Moses, "Do not let God speak to us or we will die." What kind of encounter must it have been for a nation to tremble, their bodies shivering not just from cold, but from the overwhelming sense of divine presence? This isn't just ancient superstition. Secular historians, even those who doubt the supernatural, admit that the 10 Commandments planted seeds that would later flower into the concepts of equality, justice, human rights. The impact echoes in law codes across ages, in movements for dignity and freedom. Without Sinai, would Western civilization even exist as we know it? Imagine our world without "You shall not murder," "You shall not steal." Do you feel the magnitude of that loss? But perhaps the most mysterious truth is how these laws, chiseled in rock, were ultimately meant to be inscribed upon hearts. In Jeremiah 31:33, God promises, "I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people." The stage is set for an epic journey, one that transforms cold stone into burning conviction, external command into internal compass. What happened on Sinai was not just the birth of a new religion. It was the cracking open of heaven, the invitation to walk in wisdom, the unveiling of the anatomy of love. Yet, with time, the world has grown strangely forgetful. Many shrug. Relevant for ancient nomads, perhaps, not for me. But the profound truth is that the core crises of our day, division, aimlessness, moral confusion, are symptoms of disconnecting from this ancient source. The commandments are not relics, but a map for surviving the wilderness of modern life. This shows us something profound about divine law. It was never meant to restrict, but to reveal. Never planned as a cage, but as an open door into a life of purpose. Imagine standing at Sinai yourself, the mountain alive, the ground shaking under your feet. Do you sense that behind every law there's a whisper, "This is the way, walk in it"? But if these ancient words really hold such power, why do so many view them as mere obsolete rules? And how might rediscovering their spiritual depth ignite a transformation not just of ethics, but of soul? What you're about to discover in the next part will completely change your perspective, not just on these commands, but on your relationship to the divine lawgiver himself. The hidden spiritual dynamics are waiting to be uncovered. and the journey is about to grow even more intense. Will you dare to keep going? What if the Ten Commandments are far more than a divine to-do list? What if they're a spiritual X-ray, exposing the true condition of every human heart? Imagine peeling back the layers of religious tradition and moral rule-keeping, and uncovering the pulsing spiritual energy that flows through each command. We often see the commandments as mere prohibitions, barriers set up by an austere God. But what if they are, instead, invitations, stepping stones across a river whose current could otherwise sweep us away? Let's look deeper. As you listen, can you sense the ancient words trembling with spiritual possibility? You shall have no other gods before me. On the surface, it sounds simple. One God, no rivals. But beneath that line lies a question for every age. What owns your heart? Your hopes, fears, and loyalty? You might be wondering, how does this relate to spiritual reality now, centuries later, far from Sinai's dust? The answer: this command is not a demand for uniformity, but an invitation to undivided love. The first commandment is the gateway to spiritual alignment, a call to place at the center not rules, but relationship, a living connection with the Creator, who alone can satisfy the restless hunger of the soul. The spiritual insight is dazzling. The Ten Commandments begin not with control, but with priority. Our hearts are temples, but history and our own lives prove how easily we fill them with idols, both visible and invisible. Ambitions, addictions, the approval of others, the relentless search for more. When God says, "No other gods," He's pointing us to the only center strong enough to anchor the soul in a world built on shifting sand. Many believe obedience is about repression, giving up what makes life vibrant or meaningful. But here's the profound truth. True spiritual power is released when our deepest affections are ordered rightly. Imagine a symphony guided by a master conductor. Without his direction, the music fragments into chaos. With his hand, every instrument sings in perfect harmony. The commandments tune the soul to the frequency of heaven. The second commandment, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image," goes further, right into our imagination. You might ask, why does God care so much about images? But consider this. To craft an image is to reduce the infinite to the manageable, the mysterious to the predictable. We want gods we can control, gods that reflect us, gods of convenience. But the living God is wild, transcendent, uncontainable. This command was a warning and a promise. Refuse to trade wonder for certainty. Don't settle for a smaller God. In a culture overflowing with digital idols and image obsession, does this ancient warning burn even brighter? And still, the next commandment beckons. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Have you ever felt the power in a name, the warmth of a loved one, or the ache of betrayal when it's misused? In the ancient world, a name was much more than a label. It was identity, character, presence. To misuse God's name isn't just about language, but about trivializing the one who is holy, reducing infinite glory to a careless word, a lucky charm, or a means to our own ends. The deeper spiritual insight. How we speak about God reflects how we relate to Him. Every careless use, every empty ritual silently proclaims, "I have forgotten the weight of glory." Pause for a moment. With each command, the focus shifts from mere outward conformity to the shape, direction, and affections of the inner life. You may hear a challenge rising. Can anyone live this way? The tension sharpens as we realize the commandments aren't ladders to climb by strength. They're mirrors, showing us where we stand and where we fall. So many view, remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy, as archaic or restrictive, but see the radical undercurrent. God, knowing how we burn ourselves out, speaks rest into the heart of all creation. The Sabbath is not just a day off, it is an act of defiance against every pharaoh, ancient and modern, who demands endless production. Imagine embracing a rhythm in which your worth is not measured by output, but by belovedness. The Sabbath command reaches into our exhaustion and whispers, "Stop, breathe, remember who and whose you are." Your soul was not made for unending toil, but for the deep, renewing delight of presence with God. Do you notice the movement? The first 4 commandments spiral inward: worship, reverence, rest, transforming our vertical relationship with the divine. Then, turning, the next 6 commandments shape our horizontal life with others. Honor your father and your mother. This is about more than obedience. It's about cherishing roots, dignity, generational blessing. You shall not murder. Imagine a world where every life is measured as sacred, where anger and contempt are recognized as seeds with deadly fruit. And yet, Jesus himself unearthed the spiritual heart beneath the surface. You have heard it said, "You shall not murder." But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Matthew 5:21-22. These words pierce like lightning. Long before violence erupts in the world, it blooms in the shadows of the heart. The commandments are spiritual surgery, cutting out the root to preserve the whole tree. When you hear, "You shall not commit adultery," do you feel the weight of longing, the fragility of trust, the ache for real connection? This is about more than faithfulness in marriage. It is about the undivided integrity of the soul, heart, body, and mind united, not split by secret desires or divided loyalties. In an age where relationships can dissolve with the swipe of a finger, the call to covenant love is both terrifying and electrifying. ACU signpost pointing us home. But these spiritual insights reach even deeper. You shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. With each command, God presses on our daily reality, how we treat property, speak truth, and manage our desires. The law is not simply about prohibiting harm. It is an invitation into a life of integrity, generosity, and contentment. Each command exposes the spiritual lies that enslave us. If I had more, I'd be happy. If they just saw me this way, I'd be whole. But the commandments cut through illusion, offering an entirely new way of being. This shows us something profound about the nature of sin and holiness. Sin is not just breaking a rule, but fracturing relationship, first with God, then with one another, and finally with ourselves. The law is not a cold code, but a living ecosystem. Break it anywhere, and the whole is wounded. To keep it is not just to comply, but to abide, rooted in God, flourishing in community, anchored in self-giving love. But you might be thinking, if the standard is so high, if these laws reach so deeply, what hope is there for me? Here the tension rises to its sharpest point. The Apostle Paul confesses in Romans 7, "I would not have known what coveting really was if the law had not said, 'You shall not covet,' for what I want to do I do not do, but what I hate I do." It feels like a paradox. The law exposes not just our strengths but our deepest need, our desperate dependence on grace. Yet don't miss this stunning revelation. The same God who gave the commands provides the power to keep them. Ezekiel 36:26 echoes through the centuries, promising transformation, not just information. "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh." The law points us to the very one who fulfills it in us. If we surrender, if we seek, if we dare to believe that heaven's blueprint can be traced on our own soul. Here is the ultimate spiritual surprise. The Ten Commandments are not a fence, but a doorway to union with God. They are the bones of real freedom, not the skin of dry religion. Every commandment, kept or broken, points us either into deeper bondage or toward liberation, beauty, and unimaginable joy. Behind each word, a living heartbeat, an invitation. Imagine the open hand, the outstretched arm, the voice that spoke at Sinai now whispering directly to you, "This is the way, walk in it." The law, lifted by love, breaks open into promise. If we receive it not as mere rule, but as revelation, we step into a life marked by awe, authenticity, and abiding presence. And so, a mini-revelation. The commandments are not the end of spiritual journey, but the pulse of an endless divine pursuit for you. They are a mirror, yes, but also a map, a warning, but also a wedding invitation. Yet if these commandments truly reshape the soul, what difference do they make beyond private faith or spiritual insight? Is it possible that rediscovering them could revolutionize your daily decisions, your relationships, even the way you move through today's complicated world? What you're about to uncover in the next part will connect these ancient laws to the beating heart of everyday life, revealing patterns and possibilities you've always sensed, but never fully understood. Prepare to see your own story in a new light, because the real transformation is only just beginning. What would happen if the Ten Commandments weren't just scripture in an old book, but the pulse guiding your daily life, a living rhythm for navigating the complexity of the modern world? You might be thinking, how can words etched into stone thousands of years ago possibly speak to the chaos of our digital age? But the shock is this: beneath all the noise, the human heart hasn't changed, and neither has its deepest need. Let's step into the present tense of these ancient words. Picture the digital glow from your phone, casting shadows across your room at midnight. Now ask, what are your first thoughts each morning, your last confessions at night? The very first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me," pierces straight through every era. Today, gods don't always wear golden crowns. They hum in your pocket, scroll across your screens, whisper in your ambitions and anxieties. When likes, power, attention, or comfort become what you run to, the ancient warning flares alive. What has taken first place in your soul? Imagine the freedom of being grounded in a love fierce enough to drive out every false god, old or new. Real-world example. Think of a leader, maybe a CEO, a principal, or even a parent, who anchors their decisions not in self-promotion, but in the bedrock of integrity and humility. Their influence becomes a safe haven for others. Now contrast them to the influencer who chases fame at any cost, leaving hollow relationships in their wake. This dramatic contrast shows us the living edge of the first commandment. Where our loyalty lands, our legacy is shaped. Move now to the second commandment and see how the warning against images shouts through our image-saturated culture. You might be wondering, is this just about ancient idols? But the faces we present on social media, the curated brands and filtered realities, are just new forms of the old urge to control how we're seen, to create manageable versions of ourselves and our world. The deeper truth explodes with relevance. When we create idols, we shrink God and ourselves into something safe but false. Imagine the courage of living unfiltered, no longer bowing to a pixel-perfect illusion, but reflecting the image of the invisible God through everyday acts of kindness, justice, and authenticity. Let's bring this closer. Consider the power of "you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God." In an age where language is weaponized, where texts spark wars and posts can wound thousands in seconds, honoring God's name means more than avoiding cursing. It means treating all words as sacred currency. Have you witnessed the difference when someone chooses to speak life, truth, and blessing instead of gossip, slander, or empty promises? What happens to a home, a workplace, a community, when words build up rather than tear down? Proverbs 18:21 blazes with this insight. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. What if you began to see every conversation as a chance to hallow, not profane, the presence of God? Then comes the fourth commandment, the Sabbath, a command many call impossible in our always-on world. Yet, pause and imagine. The relentless drive fades, the screens go dark, and for one day every week, you are free. No deadlines, no demands, just room to breathe and remember what matters most. Across the globe, those who intentionally set aside a day of rest report deeper creativity, better relationships, even lower stress and longer lives. Could Sabbath be exactly what our burnt-out age was hunting for all along? Picture the act of pausing not as weakness, but as boldness, a testament that your identity is rooted in being, not just doing. But what if honoring father and mother, fifth on the list, seems hard, maybe even impossible, in fractured families or cultures of disconnect? Here's where the commandments invert expectation. To honor means to recognize worth, to affirm the image of God even in those who've failed us. In real life, the story is ongoing. An adult child chooses not bitterness, but empathy, beginning a new conversation after years of silence. A caregiver supports an aging parent, learning as much about forgiveness as about patience. This commandment is not about keeping dysfunction in the dark, but about letting healing begin. The effect, sometimes subtle, sometimes seismic, ripples out into future generations. The chain of honor once forged can break cycles of brokenness. Now listen as the commandments press into the deepest scars of our world. You shall not murder. Though most recoil from literal violence, Jesus turns the mirror to our inner lives. Consider road rage, seething online arguments, or the quiet cold war in a home where grudges fester. Each time we choose to forgive, to answer anger with gentleness, to value another's life, especially the weak or unseen, we are living out Sinai's legacy. Here, the commandment comes alive with every act of peacemaking, every life preserved by empathy instead of judgment. Imagine next a business built on the seventh commandment, not just marital faithfulness, but true relational integrity. In an age of disposable connections and instant gratification, a couple chooses to fight for their vows, to seek counsel, to rebuild trust day by day. Or a friend chooses to tell the truth about betrayal, shedding secrecy for honest restoration. The world says, move on, follow your heart. The commandment whispers, there is a love worth fighting for, one that heals what seems impossible to restore. Step into the workplace, the neighborhood, the checkout line, and hear, you shall not steal. This goes far beyond heists or bank fraud. What about borrowing time from your employer when you scroll social media on the clock? Or using another's idea without credit? Or withholding generosity from someone in need when you hold the power to help? Each day, we stand at the crossroads between taking and giving. A world that practices the commandment to give rather than grasp, to honor rather than exploit, is a world ripe for transformation. You shall not bear false witness. This one stares straight into the face of clickbait, misinformation, and swirling rumors. In a culture accelerated by outrage and half-truths, what might it mean to be someone whose words can be trusted, who refuses to shape reality to fit a narrative? Envision a community where honesty is the operating system, where reputations are safe and trust grows like a living tree, slow, strong, enduring. Perhaps the most quietly radical is the 10th commandment, you shall not covet. Our entire world is built to ignite craving, endless ads, glossy images, the implied promise that satisfaction is just one purchase, one experience, one achievement away. But Scripture's wisdom blazes with countercultural fire. Life isn't measured by what we grab, but by the contentedness we cultivate. Picture a person scrolling through envy-inducing photos, then putting down the phone and giving thanks for the moment right in front of them. Coveting divides the heart, contentment unites it. Gratitude, then, becomes spiritual rebellion against systems engineered for lack. This shows us something profound about living the commandments today. Every choice, every thought, every word is a marker on the map toward spiritual wholeness. Keeping these commands is not about cold compliance, but about forging character in the heat of real temptations, building justice in a world that aches for restoration. Think of the hospital worker who, after a 16-hour shift, treats the next patient with fresh dignity rather than exhaustion. The entrepreneur who chooses fair trade, the student who refuses to cheat even when no one will know, the spouse who fights for connection when it would be easier to drift. These choices, invisible and unglamorous, are the architecture of a hidden kingdom. And yet you might still wonder, isn't this simply impossible? I fail, I forget, I fall short every day. Here, the commandments unveil another secret. They were never meant to be lived by sheer willpower alone. The Spirit of God, the animating presence Jesus promised, empowers ordinary people to love what is good and resist what destroys. And in every moment of failure, the invitation is not to shame, but to return again and again to the One who fulfills the law within us. Pause. Breathe in this truth. The commandments thrive wherever they are lived, from skyscrapers to kitchens, from noisy city streets to quiet corners of the heart. Imagine millions awakening every day to the adventure of embodying God's wisdom, radiating patterns of love and justice the world cannot ignore. But this raises an even deeper question. If the commandments can reshape individual lives and communities, what might happen if their spiritual DNA was unleashed on society's greatest challenges? Is it possible that these ancient words carry not only personal guidance, but world-changing prophetic power for the days ahead? What you're about to uncover in the next part will transform the way you see the future, both the threats that loom and the hope waiting to be born. The prophetic significance of the 10 Commandments is more urgent than ever. Keep watching, because the story is about to break open in ways you never expected. Imagine the 10 Commandments, not as relics gathering dust in a forgotten sanctuary, but as living fire radiating through history, signaling a future that is pressing in upon us even now. What if behind these ancient words lies a code not just for personal survival, but for global awakening, a prophetic blueprint for the very thresholds confronting humanity at this moment? Here's the paradox. With every passing generation, many voices pronounce God's law obsolete, outmoded, mere echoes of primitive times. Yet with each declaration of irrelevance, the world's need for these timeless truths grows more desperate. Do you feel it? As the ground shakes beneath modern life, division, disinformation, environmental collapse, a cold hunger for meaning, there's a sense that something essential has gone missing. The commandments are more than a history lesson. They are a warning flare and a possibility waiting to be claimed. But how? Let us peel back just one layer of prophecy hidden in plain sight. Consider this scene. Daniel stands in Babylon, heart pounding with visions of empires rising and falling, each more dazzling and dangerous than the last. But amid the swirl of human power, Daniel clings to the law given at Sinai. He resists compromise, models integrity, and becomes the hinge for an unfolding drama that impacts nations. Here's a vital insight. When ancient law is embodied, it generates ripples far beyond the individual, disrupting and redeeming even the machinery of empire. Can you sense the prophetic tension? Obedience as resistance, fidelity as revolution. Now fast forward to the words of Jesus, standing at the crossroads of ages. In Matthew 24:12, he prophesies, "Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of many will grow cold." But in the same breath, he speaks of endurance and hope. Notice the prophetic symmetry. Where love fails, lawlessness surges. Where the commandments are abandoned, the heart fractures. Yet the inverse is true. Revival of love always begins with a return to God's ways. Imagine a future where the commandments are not wielded as weapons, but lived as lifelines, rekindling a fire in the bones of society. But the revelation goes deeper. Many miss the pulse of destiny embedded in these words. Each commandment is a prophetic seed, destined to bloom most fully at the end of the age. Revelation 14:12 pulses with urgency. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. Here, in a vision of global crisis, the people most radiant with hope are not those who abandon God's principles, but those who embody them, carrying light into the world's darkest hours. This isn't speculative imagination, it's an ancient pattern re-emerging on the world stage. Picture the global battles raging, truth versus falsehood, greed versus generosity, desecration versus sacredness, chaos versus order. Aren't these the very battlegrounds described by Sinai's commands? The clash isn't just political or economic, it's spiritual, prophetic, and inevitable. Every crisis, every upheaval, every longing for justice is ultimately a collision between the architectures of sin and the architecture of God. What does this mean for the days ahead? Imagine a world in which "you shall not murder" becomes not just an ethic, but a prophetic force, fueling movements for justice, reconciliation, and peacemaking on every continent. When the value of life is upheld, violence is exposed for the lie it is, and cycles of hatred begin to shatter. Or picture "you shall not covet" as the antidote to a global system choking on its own envy, where nations hoard. Resources, industries fuel endless dissatisfaction, and the soul of society is sacrificed to insatiable desire. The commandment points toward a revolutionary future, the triumph of contentment over consumerism, sufficiency over scarcity. And then, with "remember the Sabbath," prophecy explodes onto the horizon. This is not only about individual rest, but the hope of a healed creation, a weekly rehearsal for a world restored. Isaiah 66:23 projects a vision forward. "From one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me, says the Lord." Echoes of Eden and a signpost to the kingdom coming, when all striving will finally, gloriously cease. Yet the most fiery prophecy may be the one written, not in stone, but on hearts. Jeremiah 31:33 blazes with promise. "This is the covenant I will make. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts." The commandments are destined to leap from tablets to nerve endings, from cold memory to living transformation. In a world of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and machine learning, the Spirit's promise is a supernatural upgrade to the very fabric of our being. Minds attuned to heaven's wisdom, hearts that instinctively love what is good. But you might be feeling the skepticism. Is it possible? Can ancient commands truly answer future questions about technology, bioethics, identity, global peace? Watch carefully. Already the lines are being drawn. As society wrestles with what does it mean to be human, and what rights are sacred. The law from Sinai echoes louder: honor, boundary, life, truth. The prophetic shape of the future will be defined not by what humanity can invent, but by whether we have the humility to receive what has already been given. This shows us something profound about the rhythm of prophecy. Every time humanity rejects God's boundaries, chaos accelerates. Yet every return to his blueprint releases restoration and creative possibility. The world's greatest innovations, civil rights, rest for the weary, justice for the vulnerable, all trace their roots to Sinai's summit, refracted through the ages. But the prophecy isn't only global, it's deeply, intimately personal. Revelation 22 closes the circle. Blessed are those who wash their robes, so that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter the city by the gates. The commandments are not just preparation for survival, but for entrance into the world for which we were made. Each "thou shalt not" is also a "you shall be," a whisper of your future identity, a destiny awakened. Stand in the tension. We are living between two worlds, the brokenness of now and the wholeness that is coming. The commandments are the footholds for this crossing, guiding us through the minefields of moral confusion, technological temptation, and spiritual apathy. They steady our stride while the earth shakes, promising that what comes next is not darkness, but dawn. But there is a costly warning embedded here. Prophecy also predicts a time when commandment-keeping will come with a cost. In every era, those who love truth, who refuse to bow to lesser gods, become targets of ridicule and resistance. Yet, paradoxically, Scripture promises these very people become luminaries, beacons of hope when the world grows dim. In Daniel 12:3, the prophecy is breathtaking. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. Imagine your life, not just obeying commands, but blazing with the kind of wisdom and kindness that turns the heads of nations. Imagine whole communities becoming outposts of prophetic hope, places of justice, rest, forgiveness, honesty, a foretaste of the kingdom to come. This is not fantasy. It is the secret that has echoed since Sinai, and it is calling your name even now. And so, the greatest possibility rises before us. The Ten Commandments are not just a checklist for survival. They are signposts of a kingdom breaking in, invitations to partner with God's dream for the world. Every time you love, honor, rest, and resist false gods, you are participating in prophecy made flesh. Each ordinary act of faithfulness is a brushstroke that shapes the portrait of eternity. But here, the mystery deepens. If the commandments will mark those who endure, and if prophecy promises a future shaped by these very words, the ultimate question presses in: how can we move from mere obedience to deep spiritual union with the lawgiver himself? What would it mean for the heart of stone to become a heart of flesh, for ancient law to become living love? What you're about to discover in the next part is the secret for transcending mere duty and entering the burning reality of divine intimacy. The journey from prophecy to presence is about to become intensely personal, an encounter you cannot afford to miss. Are you ready to step closer? What if the Ten Commandments are more than a foundation? What if they are a doorway into direct communion with the heart of God? Imagine standing not before cold stone, but in the radiance of divine presence, invited not just to obey, but to encounter, to know, to be transformed from the inside out. It's here, on the far side of law and duty, that a deeper secret reveals itself. The commands are not a wall between you and God, but a bridge stretching from Sinai's fire to the most intimate chambers of your soul. Pause for a moment. Feel the weight, the possibility. "You shall have no other gods before me," is not simply a demand for exclusivity. It is a cry of love, the call of a lover who knows the soul's capacity to be fractured, distracted, divided. Imagine God, not as a distant judge, but as the faithful one yearning for your undivided affection. In the ancient Song of Songs, a whisper echoes, "I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine." Song 6:3. The first commandment is not just about worship, it is about union. It is the invitation to let God be your center, the axis upon which everything else turns. As you reflect on "you shall not make for yourself a carved image," realize this command is not merely prohibiting ancient idol statues. It is urging you to seek a direct, unmediated relationship with the living God. There is a radical intimacy here. God refuses to be reduced, filtered, or controlled. He refuses to be remade in our image because he yearns to reveal himself as he truly is, to your spirit, spirit to spirit, face to face. How might your life change if you stopped substituting shadows for reality, busyness for being, and instead let yourself be startled by the wonder of his presence? You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Names in the ancient world were more than identifiers. They were revelations of character, gateways to relationship. When God shares his name, I am, he offers you access to infinite trustworthiness and nearness. The command is not just a warning against careless speech. It is an invitation to draw near, to call on his name in truth, in desperation, in hope. Think of those moments when you whisper "God help" in the darkness or shout "thank you" in the sunlight. This is communion, real, raw, unhindered. Then the Sabbath commandment, oh, what a treasure. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This is not just a stop in your week, but a pulse of belonging. In the deep hush of Sabbath, time itself becomes sacred space. You are no longer a machine churning output, but a beloved child resting in the embrace of the Creator. Imagine feeling the peace that comes when you let go of striving, surrendering for one sacred day to pure relationship. Sabbath rest, you taste eternity, a preview of the face-to-face fellowship for which your soul was made. The next movement in this epic symphony shifts from vertical to horizontal, but don't miss the secret. True connection with others is rooted in deep connection with God. Honor your father and your mother. At its heart, this isn't merely about family ties, it's about receiving life as a gift, recognizing the sacred web in which your existence was formed. In every act of honor, you participate in God's ongoing creation, a spiritual echo that honors the giver through the gift. Imagine the healing that comes when gratitude replaces resentment, when blessing flows where only curses have lived before. When you read, "You shall not murder," feel the trembling significance. It is a call to honor the image of God in every living person. Spiritual connection deepens as you see others as God sees them, each life a sacred story, each encounter a chance to touch the divine. Every act of forgiveness, every refusal to retaliate isn't just self-restraint. It is spiritual alignment, an act of trust in the God who claims vengeance as his own. What would it feel like to release the burden of anger, stepping instead into the freedom of mercy? This is worship, raw, costly, holy. "You shall not commit adultery" is not simply a command for physical purity, but a revelation of God's faithful, covenant love. Intimacy in marriage becomes an earthly metaphor for the spiritual union to which you're called. Faithfulness, vulnerability, daring to trust. When you guard your heart and honor your commitments, even when no one is watching, you are responding to the deeper call. As the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. Isaiah 62:5. Can you see it? Every choice for fidelity, every turning from temptation is a rehearsal for ultimate faithfulness, God's faithfulness to you. As you consider, "You shall not steal," understand that generosity is the essence of spiritual vitality. The commandment is spiritual training. To open your hands, not close your fists. To trust that God's provision is sufficient, that you need not grab what is not yours. Imagine the freedom of knowing you are held, supplied, and invited to participate in the flow of divine abundance. Giving becomes worship, corrupt gain withers, and community is knit together by trust. You shall not bear false witness. Here, spiritual connection is forged in truthfulness. Every lie, every distortion chips away at intimacy, with others and with God. But honesty, spoken in love, builds a temple where trust and presence reside. The Lord is near to all who call on him in truth. Psalm 145:18. Can you feel the relief of dropping your masks, stepping into the light of authenticity? In a world built on image and deception, truth is the currency of deepest connection. Then comes the final wave. You shall not covet. This commandment speaks directly to the ache beneath all other longings. Coveting is the spiritual static that distorts our ability to receive, to delight, to find sufficiency in God alone. It disconnects us from gratitude and therefore from intimacy itself. Imagine the transforming release when desire is purified, not just disciplined, but transfigured into contentment. In that space, you receive what's given as miracle, and your heart is quieted in the company of the giver. This shows us something profound. The 10 Commandments are not steps on a ladder to reach God. They are invitations into relationship at every turn. Obedience is not a fearful checkmark, but a love song, a dance with the divine who initiates, empowers, and completes what he commands. You might be wondering, is this depth really for me? Can I actually experience such intimacy, not just know about God, but know him truly? The answer, hidden in both Old and New Testaments, is a roaring yes. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. James 4:8. The law, etched by the finger of God, is now meant to be inscribed by his Spirit on the interior walls of your life. The commandments become pathways leading through the thicket of daily busyness, pride, and disappointment, straight into the garden of communion. Here is the mini epiphany you've been seeking. Every commandment rightly understood is God's outstretched hand, beckoning you further in. Law becomes intimacy. Duty is transfigured into delight. But the journey is not meant to be walked alone. If individual hearts are set on fire by this connection, what might happen when whole communities begin to live out these commandments together? The next part will reveal how these spiritual bonds multiply, weaving individuals into something even greater, a tapestry of shared faith, powerful enough to shift the world. Are you ready to see what happens when divine encounter becomes a movement? The story is about to gather and ignite. What if the leap from inspiration to transformation is closer than you ever dreamed? The yearning you feel, the restless whisper in your spirit, exists not because you're failing, but because the ancient words of the 10 Commandments are alive, calling you forward. Now imagine, this very moment could become the ground where theory takes root, where holy law becomes living practice. The question is no longer, are the commandments relevant? But, how do I begin? Let's enter into the rhythm of practical steps, concrete yet radiant with spiritual possibility. Every action you take is a seed, a small act of faith that grows into a mighty tree, nurturing your soul and your relationships. Don't rush past the invitation. Pause, breathe, and let these steps speak possibility into your ordinary days. First, place God at the center, intentionally and daily. The first commandment is a daily reset of your spiritual compass. Begin each morning before screens and schedules by speaking aloud. God, you are my first love. Let no other gods compete for my heart today. It could be a whispered prayer in the quiet, a verse written on your mirror, a breath drawn with purpose. The power is in the intentionality. This daily act realigns your priorities, clarifies your decisions, and sanctifies your hours. Second, strip away the substitutes, identify and dethrone your idols. Ask yourself, what do I run to for comfort, validation, escape? Name them. Write them down. Then, with courage, choose one tangible action each week to starve these idols. For some, it means limiting social media. For others, letting go of perfectionism or the praise of others. The goal is not guilt, but freedom, making room for God's unfiltered presence, refusing to let images, digital or mental, crowd out the reality of the divine. Third, reverence God's name through your words and actions. Make your speech a sacred instrument. Pause before complaining, cursing, or trivializing holy things. Instead, bless, praise, encourage. Take 30 seconds, even now, to speak gratitude and blessing aloud. Notice how it changes the atmosphere. When God's name is hallowed in your life, His presence becomes more real, and your speech becomes a stream of living water. Fourth, practice Sabbath, rest as rebellion. This is no passive withdrawal, but an audacious step of trust in a culture addicted to hurry. Choose one day or even one set-aside period each week to step off the treadmill, silence your phone, unplug from work, and enter sacred rest. Fill this time with worship, nature, laughter, or silence. The result? Identity-rooted, stress-eased, and an open space for God to speak. Many find that starting small, perhaps a Sabbath meal with family or a quiet walk, can ignite a chain reaction of spiritual renewal. Now the commandments pivot to your relationships. Fifth, pursue honor at home and in heritage. Write a letter or send a message of thanks to a parent, guardian, or mentor, even if the relationship is imperfect. Or, if honoring means setting boundaries for safety, do so prayerfully and with peace. The act of honor, offered in humility, often becomes the hinge for healing and hope to enter old wounds. Each link in this chain of respect strengthens the community around you. Sixth, choose life in conflict. The sixth commandment's spirit is kept not just by refraining from harm, but by cultivating forgiveness and peacemaking. When conflict arises, refuse to allow rage to take root. Speak to God before you speak to your adversary. Meditate on Jesus' words, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." Matthew 5:9. Then, take the first step towards reconciliation, even if it's a simple apology or a silent prayer for your enemy. Spiritual growth is fertilized in the soil of actively choosing reconciliation over resentment. Seventh, build a wall of faithfulness around your intimacy. Guard your relationships, romantic, familial, and friendships, by practicing transparency and active, selfless love. Set boundaries that protect your commitment. Delete an old conversation that tempts your heart. Schedule time for honest dialogue with those you love, and pray for a heart that delights in God's design for intimacy. The world is starved for faithfulness. By embodying it, you become a beacon of hope and safety in a landscape of broken trust. Now resist the subtle thefts in your life. Eighth, embrace radical generosity. Instead of asking, "What am I owed?" ask, "What can I give?" Make a weekly habit of giving. Your time, your resources, your attention. Sponsor a meal, volunteer, pay an honest compliment, or return what you borrowed long ago. Each act is a refusal to hoard or take what isn't yours, and a declaration that you trust God's provision more than your own grasping. Ninth, speak truth even when silence is easier. Before sharing a story, post, or even answer a question, pause. Is this true? Is this loving? Is this necessary? Practice becoming a person whose word is reliable, whose reputation is synonymous with trust. If you catch yourself twisting a story, correct it, even if it's awkward. The result is a new courage and the slow, steady growth of trust that spills over into every relationship. Finally, cultivate contentment. The 10th commandment invites you to a spirit-wide detox of comparison. Begin and end each day with gratitude. List 3 unique things for which you're thankful. No repeats allowed. When envy whispers, "You deserve more," "You're missing out," respond with praise, thanking God for His wisdom in what He gives and what He withholds. Watch as desire shifts from anxious craving to settled joy. This shows us something profound. Spiritual maturity doesn't erupt overnight. It grows, one surrendered choice at a time. The commandments are not a sprint, but a pilgrimage, a path winding through failures and victories, dry spells and floods of wonder. Each step you take, however small, is noticed by the God who walked the mountain with Moses and walks the valleys with you. But the real secret: don't take the journey alone. Transformation ignites most powerfully in community, when you confess struggles, celebrate progress, and call one another higher. Consider joining or forming a small group dedicated to living out the 10 commandments, sharing insights, holding each other accountable, and praying for the Spirit's empowerment. You may wonder, will I ever live up to these standards? What if I stumble again and again? Hear the gospel mystery. You are not called to climb this mountain in your own strength. Philippians 2:13 declares, "For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose." Every cry for help, every step of courage, every turn from temptation is met by a flood of grace. Perfection is not the prerequisite. Humility and perseverance are the fuel. Pause and let this soak in. The 10 commandments are not rules that disqualify you, but ancient promises God delights to fulfill in you, day by day. Faithfulness in small things nurtures the soul for larger callings. Failure is not fatal. It is the field where the seeds of repentance and resilience sprout and grow. But as your roots sink deeper, the story is still not complete. If your journey is powerful alone, what happens when it is multiplied? When individuals join hands, voices, stories? When spiritual growth becomes a shared revolution? What you're about to discover will ignite the embers of solitary pursuit into a blaze of transformed community. The most beautiful part of the journey is just ahead. Will you walk into it? Picture this: a fractured world, bracing against storms of confusion and isolation, yet anchored by an unseen thread, a covenant that binds individuals not just to God, but to one another. The 10 commandments, so often viewed as personal rules, were crafted to birth a community marked by holiness, justice, and startling compassion. Imagine not 10 solitary pilgrims climbing Sinai's heights, but a whole nation, a chorus of voices, trembling together in awe. Every law, every "thou shalt not" or "you shall," was meant to weave the stories of many into a tapestry of shared life, a people whose glow would illuminate the entire world. Let's step inside the miracle of spiritual community. At its best, church or spiritual family is not a building but a living mosaic. In its heart pulses the 10 commandments, shaping how we gather, how we forgive and serve, how we listen and dare to hope. These words do not form a barrier between us. They are a common table, inviting each one, rich or poor, young or old, known or forgotten, to pull up a chair and belong. How does this unfold? Let the drama play out in the everyday. In a small, tight-knit group, a new member confesses that anger has cost her friendships. She expects judgment, but receives honest truth spoken with love, and a band of encouragers who walk with her into healing. This is the 6th commandment, refracted through many hearts. You shall not murder, not just the preservation of life, but the nurturing of hearts, the resurrection of relationships thought dead. Here, ancient law becomes living mercy. Can you feel the difference between community defined by gossip, rumor, or competitiveness, and one where the ninth commandment is cherished? Imagine a fellowship where reputations are guarded more fiercely than secrets are spread. Trust kindles slowly, but it burns bright and long, lighting a sanctuary of safety where vulnerability is possible, where the wounds and wonders of life are carried together. Each truth spoken in love forges a quiet miracle, a place where masks can crumble and real transformation can begin. Think of hospitality dinner tables and potluck suppers, each plate passed reflecting the eighth commandment, you shall not steal. Here, the practice of sharing, of open-handed generosity, becomes the immune system of the community, fending off envy, greed, and division. When one family stumbles into joblessness, needs are met by open wallets and open doors. The commandments are not theoretical. They are made tangible in casseroles, in rent paid. Anonymously, in the steadfast refusal to let anyone journey alone. But community is not only forged in giving, it is sustained in holy restraint. Consider honest confession. An elder confesses to coveting another's success, not out of shame, but because it's safe to do so, knowing the group understands the spiritual gravity of envy. Instead of judgment, he receives prayers for gratitude and perspective. Over time, everyone finds that the 10th commandment, you shall not covet, is easier when longing is relinquished together, replaced by shared joy in the unique gifts of each life. Imagine the ripple effects when an entire neighborhood or workplace quietly aligns itself with the Sabbath principle, a collective refusal to idolize busyness. Weekly, screens go dark, faces turn toward one another, time expands. Children sense the difference. Rest is reclaimed, but so is relationship. Even those who aren't religious can feel the subtle shift when shared rhythms of work and rest honor the beauty of human limitation and divine presence. And what about honoring parents in community? Beyond individual families, it's the act of cherishing the wisdom of elders, of listening to stories from those who've traveled further on the path. Multi-generational gatherings, mentorship meals, and collaborative service projects create an unbroken chain of memory and blessing. Here, the 5th commandment forms the backbone of unity, reminding the young and old that everyone's story matters. Everyone's history is sacred. But tension, too, finds its place. What happens when betrayal slices through trust, or when wounds fester beneath the surface? Here, the commandments become not just guideposts, but tools for resurrection. When forgiveness is chosen over payback, when wounded members gather to reconcile and rebuild, no matter how long or hard the road, the law moves from tablets of stone into beating hearts. Each act of reconciliation is a modern reenactment of Israel beneath Sinai, bound together not by perfection, but by relentless grace. You might wonder, does such community really exist? Isn't it naive to believe there could be a people who truly embody these commandments amid our cynicism and pain? Yet across the world, stories abound, house churches rising in regimes of persecution, neighbors forming circles of shared belonging in the hardest places, families opening homes to foster children, churches refusing to let scandal or division have the last word. These are microcosms of the ancient dream, places where divine fire still forges holy people. This shows us something profound. The 10 Commandments, when lived in community, become not just a rule book, but the DNA of a new kind of humanity. Their fruit is resurrection, evoked in laughter echoing off kitchen walls, in gentle correction offered without shaming, in resources pooled to lift up the fallen. encouraged to speak truth and patience, to bear each other's burdens. And there's a rhythm to this mystery, a sacred choreography of giving, receiving, building, restoring. Each part of the body brings what only it can offer: wisdom, energy, vulnerability, support, vision, service. The commandments form the choreography itself, not a rigid dance, but a fluid, spirit-breathed movement where love is enacted with every step. But perhaps this is the greatest wonder of all. When community flourishes, the world cannot help but take notice. Jesus himself underscored this, declaring, "By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." John 13:35. Sinai's laws flowering into a culture of Christ-like love. This is how invisible faith becomes a living signpost, drawing the lonely and lost into holy belonging. Yet even the strongest communities face storms, conflict, fatigue, misunderstanding, seasons of testing that seem as bleak as any wilderness. Here's where the ancient secret returns. They press deeper, together. Prayer is multiplied, laughter cuts the silence, faith is passed around like daily bread. The commandments keep calling the people back to center, back to presence, back to purpose. But this raises an even deeper question. If communities rooted in the commandments can heal wounds and ignite holy fire among many, what happens in the quiet folds of the individual heart? When the story turns inward, how do the commandments shape and transform your own journey, your hidden scars and hopes? What you're about to experience in the final part is a journey of personal reflection and radical transformation. Real stories, real struggles, real breakthrough. The greatest revolution might just begin with a single life, yours, set ablaze by ancient law and present grace. Will you dare let it start within you? Journey with me, for just a moment, into a place where all the noise of the world falls away, a place where you stand face to face with your own story. Here, on the silent summit of personal reflection, the 10 Commandments are no longer thunder on a distant mountain. They become a whisper in your soul, an invitation to be changed from the inside out. Imagine looking back over the chapters of your life. Have you searched for identity in fleeting gods, chased after love in imperfect faces, spun your worth on the ever-grinding wheel of achievement? Perhaps you see chapters marked by regret, for a word spoken in anger, a relationship wounded, a promise broken. You might carry secret shame or hidden longing, quietly wondering if real transformation is possible. But here, at the intersection of ancient law and living possibility, something sacred stirs. The 10 Commandments, meant to shape a people, also become a personal surgery, a scalpel that divides truth from lies within your heart. This isn't condemnation, it's invitation. It's the moment when you realize God's laws were written for someone like me, for my healing, my wholeness, my redemption. Vivid stories begin to surface, snapshots of ordinary people, undone and remade by ancient wisdom. Picture a young professional, once obsessed with applause, who finally surrenders their frantic striving before God. In the small morning hours they pray, "Let me have no other gods before you." Slowly, they discover the surprising peace of being seen by the one who needs no resume. An addiction loses its grip. The soul breathes again. Or a woman, estranged from her family for decades, reads the command to honor father and mother, not with blind loyalty, but with honest grace. She dares to write a letter, filled not with blame, but with gratitude for the ways she was loved. Healing takes years, yet the frozen river of resentment melts, drip by drip, and hope flows once more between hearts, once barricaded by pain. You might feel the weight of an old betrayal, a secret kept, a friendship lost. You shall not bear false witness. The command becomes a mirror. For one man it prompts confession, the courage to admit a lie that fractured a lifelong bond. The conversation is raw, costly, soaked in tears, yet as truth is spoken, forgiveness surfaces, timid and trembling, but real. An old relationship is reborn. The freedom that follows feels holy, almost too good to be true. Picture a student daily bombarded by images of what she should desire: better grades, a better body, a shinier life. The 10th commandment glimmers on her mind: you shall not covet. Instead of chasing every trend, she begins a gratitude journal, capturing unexpected gifts: a parent's smile, a sunrise, a note from a friend. Over months, the grip of jealousy loosens, making room for wonder and contentment. Each act of thanksgiving rewires the territory of her heart. Think of the man who, tormented by anger, nearly lost everything he cherished. You shall not murder. Christ's deeper interpretation pierces him, not for violence, but for the simmering grudge within. One night, he chooses prayer over bitterness. He reaches out, first with a text, then a simple apology. Reconciliation is slow, but it begins. Each day forward becomes a new step out of darkness. Each act of mercy, the breaking of a hidden chain. This shows us something profound. The 10 Commandments are not cold doctrines, but living fountains, if you dare to drink. They reach into every wound, every craving, every tangled knot of the soul, declaring, you are not too far gone. There is a way home. Where you once believed you were beyond forgiveness, the commandments open the gates of return. Every you shall not becomes an I will restore. But the stories do not always follow the arc of sudden breakthrough. Sometimes transformation unfolds quietly, almost imperceptibly. A subtle shift, a new resolve, a pattern of old temptation interrupted by grace. A weary parent aspires each morning to tell the truth, to model trust, to weave compassion into mundane moments. Or an entrepreneur resists the urge to cut corners, honoring God by honest work even when it costs him profit. These are revolutions lit in secret rooms, yet they echo heaven's music. You might be wondering, how do I begin? Can my own story be rewritten? The answer lies in the slow, persistent surrender of each day. The 10 Commandments are not obstacles for the strong, but handrails for the stumbling. They align the hidden architecture of your life with the heart of God. In your frailty, the commandments become prayer. In your failures, they become the soil where new growth pushes through. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Psalm 51:10. Reflect now, not with guilt but with hope, on where these ancient words invite you to grow. Is it in the honesty of your speech, the purity of your love, the gratitude in your heart, the loyalty of your worship? Invite God to reveal the secret places that need his healing. Invite his Spirit to inscribe the commandments, not on tablets of stone, but on the deepest layers of your being. And as you walk, remember, every true transformation becomes an invitation. Others watch, your friends, your children, your co-workers, even strangers in the grocery line. Your story of change becomes a living gospel, echoing the law fulfilled and renewed in Christ. The commandments, lived and loved, become a gravitational force, drawing others toward hope, toward community, and ultimately toward the giver of every good gift. This is the great reversal. The 10 Commandments, once dismissed as relics, become the script for a life of passion, meaning, and astonishing freedom. They are not burdens, but bridges, leading you out of exile and into the very heart of God. But perhaps, as this journey draws to a close, one final mystery aches to be unveiled. If the commandments can shape a life and heal a people, what happens when their author walks the earth with us? When the law becomes flesh and grace invades every law? What you're about to see will turn everything upside down. The story's greatest revelation is still waiting. Will you dare to stay until the last veil is lifted? As we arrive at this final ascent, pause and consider. The journey you've just taken is no mere education in ancient rules, but an encounter with a living legacy, a river of wisdom whose waters still nourish the thirstiest corners of our world and our hearts. You began perhaps with a distant curiosity, 10 sentences said to shape eternity. Now you hold not just knowledge, but an invitation to see the 10 Commandments as a bridge between heaven's design and your most ordinary moments, as a flame kindled afresh in a time aching for clarity, substance, and hope. Now we can clearly see that the 10 Commandments are not static relics, frozen in time, or chiseled beyond reach. They are the speaks of God's heartbeat, the eternal architecture upon which love, justice, and community rest. When we bring all these truths together, the lattice work of ancient command and modern longing forms an unbreakable bond, a sacred blueprint for both personal transformation and societal revival. These commandments aren't dusty constraints. Their power is revolutionary, breathing with prophetic fire and resurrecting dignity in a world always tempted to forget who and whose we are. Many live as if morality is an outdated burden, as if freedom is found in detachment and truth is whatever soothes the moment's ache. But you are invited to see with new eyes that obedience is the seedbed of freedom, that boundaries unleash beauty, and that the voice from Sinai still calls your name, not with cold demand, but loving urgency. Come home, be made whole. Let this be your recognition moment. Feel the weight and wonder of what you have discovered. The commandments are not merely something to study, they are someone to meet. Standing behind each one is the God who seeks you, not with rigid force, but with patient, relentless love. The refrains of "you shall not" are in truth the promises of "you shall be," a people set apart, a soul set free, a community woven together. Take a breath. You have persevered through the thundering clouds, and now see the golden thread that ties every story, every question, every longing together. The law, once feared, is revealed as a gift, a love letter written in fire and fulfilled in flesh. So what is the culminating insight, the final aha that brings everything into radiant clarity? It is this: the commandments were never meant to save you by willpower alone. They exist so that you might become a dwelling place of the divine. The law that once thundered from the mountain now whispers in your spirit, fulfilled and elevated in Jesus Christ, the living Word who did not abolish the law, but filled it with love, grace, and transformative power. Imagine finally seeing the entire divine tapestry. The boundaries given were always doors, leading you into union with the lawgiver himself. The stone tablets pointed to a new heart, so that what God asks of you is always, first, what He is working in you. This is the eternal truth. God's commands are not a test, but a touch, a way to encounter life on God's terms, true and deep and unshakable. Obedience is participation in His own holiness, not a burden, but a rising joy. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. Psalm 19:7. When you yield, you come alive. But a revelation is only the beginning. Transformation is born in what you do next. Knowledge alone cannot change your life, but lived truth ignites destiny. Now, the invitation is pressed into your hands. Move from understanding to embodiment. Step into the spiritual journey that the commandments laid out, not as a checklist, but as footholds for the climb, lanterns for your path. Imagine how your life would change if you ordered your days with unhurried love for God. if your speech became fragrant with blessing, if Sabbath-rooted rest stamped meaning on your weeks, if truth and gratitude uncoiled the knots of comparison and resentment. When you begin to align your soul to God's design, the chains you thought unbreakable begin to fall. Fear gives way to boldness, shame dissolves in belovedness, and even your smallest choices reverberate with eternal purpose. Consider right now 3 practical steps to enter into this process. First, choose one commandment that most challenges or draws you. Write it out, meditate on it, ask God by His Spirit to illuminate its meaning in your life this week. Watch how your perspective, your desires, even your relationships begin to shift. Second, invite someone into the journey. Share what you're learning with a friend, a family member, or a faith community. Accountability multiplies joy and perseverance. Third, cultivate gratitude as a daily weapon against coveting, comparison, and discontent. Before sleep or at first light, speak aloud 3 reasons for thanksgiving, each day unique. This is how you build spiritual muscle, one intention, one surrendered choice at a time. These aren't boxes to check, they are invitations into blessing. When you begin to walk in these patterns, you'll taste the goodness of God, not once, but again and again, compounding into legacy. But transformation doesn't stop with you. The heartbeat of redemption is community. Imagine if your household, your church, even your workplace became a living mosaic of these commandments, where justice flows like a river, mercy blooms in every conversation, and peace guards every heart. The world aches for a new melody, a counterculture of truth, courage, integrity, and joy. And you are called to be the note that starts the song. So here's your sacred engagement. Share your story. How have you wrestled with or been awakened by the commandments? Which one has become a key turning point in your life? Have you seen these ancient words mend a wound, restore a relationship, or shine light on a dark path? Share in the comments below, not just for an algorithm, but as your spiritual offering, your written stone in the community's collective altar. As you speak, you create space for others to step forward. And if this video has stirred your soul, share it with someone you know. Let this movement spread, stone to stone, story to story, heart to heart. Do you sense the anticipation? This is God's moment for you, a hinge of destiny, a call not just to remember, but to awaken, to stand at the crossroads of tradition and transformation, choosing the narrow road that leads home. In future videos, we'll explore how grace and commandment dance together, how Jesus reframed every law through the cross and resurrection, and how you can live with supernatural courage and radiant hope in a world still wandering in the wilderness. As the river of this journey comes to rest, let one final declaration echo in your soul, a promise, a summons, a benediction for every road ahead. The law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. God's commands are the path, but Christ is the way. Walk in His steps, and you will find not only commandments to keep, but a heart remade to love. Let that truth linger, like the hush after thunder, like the fire after rain. Take a moment of silence, breathe it in. The commandments still matter, because you still matter, and your story is still being written in the hands of an eternal author. So choose, today and every day, to let these ancient words become your living song, and let your life be what Sinai intended, a miracle of love, obedience, and unstoppable hope.